Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/VinArmani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at VinArmani is my handle there. We're also streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Well, it's Monday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific, and we are coming to you from fabulous and starting to cool down Las Vegas, Nevada. I actually just got in last night from New Hampshire. I was at Free Coast Fest up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I had a fantastic time. I want to say thank you to everybody who was there. Quite an experience, and definitely something that I would suggest that you go and check out. I was actually blown away. I had no idea that that little gem of a region even existed in the United States, and the group of people there are incredibly unique in terms of the people that I've met associated with the Liberty Movement. And one of the people that I got to spend time with is actually our guest today. Matt Phillips, the president of the Free State Project, is going to be on with us in the second hour. We've also got some other great stories for you today. We're going to talk a little bit of Trump. You know, I have been sort of giving the prelude to the fact that I do believe that we are about to head into a war, and I think that there are some storm clouds gathering, and it's not just from the hurricanes. We're going to talk about that. Of course, it is the 9/11 edition of the show. Matt Phillips actually has some interesting, he was in New York on 9/11, so we're going to get a chance to talk with him about that in addition to some other stuff. We're also going to talk about this Equifax hack. There's a tie-in now with cryptocurrency. There's some other tie-ins and things that are happening with ICOs, banks all around the world. There's a currency war that's about to start, and I think that's very, very important for people to be paying attention to. So, to help us get through all of that today, as always, my good friend, producer and co-host, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian!
Good morning, Vin.
Oh, good morning, dude. I'm worn out. But it's the good kind of tired.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about the Free State?
The Free Coast Festival.
Free Coast.
Yes.
Free Coast.
So they call it Free Coast. It's the Seacoast region of New Hampshire, which is like, I believe it's either 11 or 18 miles of coastline that they have. Mm-hmm. So it's not a lot. There's like 5 towns that are along it, and the biggest, and I say biggest, there's only 20,000 people that are there, is Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is like, it's like out of a postcard, dude. It's crazy. Like it's this small town, but it packs up full of tourists. It's like still the old, brick streets, walkways, old churches, cool. and the old docks and all of that there. We on Saturday, we went from Portsmouth, where the initial sort of things were the first night, over to this venue that's across the river in a town called Newmarket, which similarly is this like beautiful, quaint New England town, and to this venue that's a music venue that started in the 1960s as a music venue, but was built in the 1860s as a church, a stone church. So this music venue is called the Stone Church, and you walk in, and it's a church that they've changed into a music venue. And there were some speakers. I spoke there. I did finally get a good recording.
Nice.
Well. To a degree, the sound that I was getting, the video looks good, and the organizers were videoing as well, so maybe they didn't have these sound issues. But the sound guy was, while all the sound in the house sounded good, the sound that he was giving me, at least, I guess, was his monitor. And so at a certain point, he decided he was going to listen to hurricane updates.
Oh, man.
So for about a minute and a half, it was like some morning zoo guy talking about the hurricanes on the radio, and my voice like over the top. But I edited it in classic reality TV style. I bet you people won't even notice where that was. It was an important little minute and a half, but still, it's about a 20-minute talk that I gave. I was in a church, so I'm like, I'm going to give an agorist sermon.
Nice.
And so that's what it is. I should have that up by the end of the day today.
Cool.
Got a chance to meet a lot of people there.
Yeah.
So each region in New Hampshire, now I've been to 2 things, right? I went to Pork Fest and then this, and then in February I'm going to the third one, which is in Manchester. So 3 sort of different vibes. The first one is a very like up in the mountains, camping type of vibe, like outdoors, all of that.
That's cool.
This one was really entrepreneurial focused. So the organizers, the Human Action Foundation, and a lot of the people there are all entrepreneurs. And it's like mid to late 30s to like late 40s. Most people had families. It was like way more cool, techie, a lot of engineers, a lot of
that's cool,
podcasters, all about liberty, right? So totally different vibe than the first time, Pork Fest, which is kind of like out there, a little bit hippie and whatnot. I didn't see anybody carrying guns at this one like at the other one. And you know, so it was the cool music venue, very hip. And then in the evening, we went on a cruise out to these islands that are the Isle of Shoals that are like way out, an evening cruise, and watch the sunset and everything. So super cool, great speakers, all around great event.
Swarm City was there too, right?
Matt Carano was there. I didn't see any of the other Swarm City guys there, but got a chance to hang out with Matt and talk with Matt quite a bit.
Yeah, I saw the post on Twitter.
Yeah, so it was very cool, dude. Like I'm glad that I went. I'll definitely go back next year. And man, it's I'm starting to fall in love with New Hampshire. It's really easy to when you get around people who are like-minded.
Right.
You know, it's hard to find people who are really living the principles. But you know, I mean, Human Action Foundation is named after Human Action, the book by Ludwig von Mises. So it's like, yeah, they're all about it over there. That was
awesome.
A lot of fun, but I'm a little weary. I'm a little weary, but we're going to get through this, and we've got a great guest, Matt Phillips. He's awesome. I actually met him in Acapulco, and it was him coming to my talk where he was like, oh, you should go to Pork Fest. You should come and speak at Pork Fest. And then, of course, this was a Free State Project event, and so he was there at this event, and we got a chance to hang out and talk, and he showed us a few restaurants and whatnot that were there. It's great. I had a great time, man. It was really, really fun. So we've got that guest in the second hour. We've got some... Actually, I like these stories today. I like these stories. With the hurricanes...
Yeah, this was a crazy week, too.
The one thing that I also found interesting, because remember what we were talking about, so my prediction about North Korea and the war situation, I'm still all about it. I still think something's going to happen. But what I do find interesting is, even back in March when I made the prediction, one of the things that I said was, you know, it feels like 2001.
Right.
And isn't it interesting that here we are, September 11th, 2001, and a disaster, a series of disasters that have turned into one big disaster is what's on everybody's mind. Just exactly where we were back in 2001.
There's a whole list of things that have happened, like, because I was kind of looking at what's happened since the eclipse, too. And there's a whole list of things. Fires. Earthquake, fires, hurricanes. Heat waves.
So, you know, it really makes you wonder, you know, there are the people who are the conspiracy theorists who are like very much about that the Illuminati is like organizing things
HAARP
and whatnot.
And all that stuff.
I don't necessarily think that it's that. But I do think that because things move in cycles, that people who, and again, this is something that's been studied for a very, very long time, back to ancient Egypt. It's not a study that's done out in the open, but the powers that be have been studying cycles.
Yeah.
And not only natural cycles, but also cultural cycles, and where a particular group of people, where their minds will be at any given time. You know, like in ancient India, it was very, very common. This is true of Greece too. You know, the Greek kings would go to an oracle and they would say, is now a good time to go to war? Should we be going to war now? And they'd be like, not now, not yet. Wait until after the winter and then go to war. And they have this idea of like auspicious days. That's something in Indian astrology is like, this would be a good day to start something. And I think that it's as much about where a culture's mind is, where things are in the zeitgeist, that if you study culture, it's like, okay, I think they're ready for this right now. Or their minds are open for this right now.
Totally
or this is what they're going to be focused on right now. And it's like disaster. It's interesting, you know, that like back in March, it was just very instinctual for me where I was like, oh, this feels like this.
Right.
And maybe I'm picking up, you know, the zeitgeist, what's going on. Maybe I'm a little more attuned to the culture, but it's like, isn't it curious that exactly to the day, it's a terrible set. Now this time it's a set of disasters, but it's so many disasters that it's international. So we could say it's like an internationally conscious disaster awareness, right? Where everybody in the world, because it's connected, because the things that happen in the Caribbean, because the shit in Mexico, because I think there was a big earthquake in Japan.
Yeah, I think there was an earthquake in like Idaho or something too.
See?
5.2 or something like that. And also, one thing I forgot to mention, the biggest solar flare.
Yes.
For like 12 years or something. For the last.
That's
12
right,
years.
and it knocked out some communication stuff. So there's way more to this than we give credit for.
Yeah.
You know, in my book, you could throw up the. If people want to go, thank you everybody who has purchased this book. I got a chance to get some signed copies off to some of the people who were the organizers of the event, and people who were there who had read it told me that they really enjoyed it. I spend some time in the book using the analogy of bees in a hive, and the fact that, you know, if you take the 10,000-foot view and you look at human beings, we are very much like a hive creature. You know, like you look at Earth from space and you're like, okay, this is what ants or termites or bees, the way that we construct, the way that we move around, and you look at it and you realize, wow, this is moving on its own. Like, there wasn't some big hand that was like, build the city like this, do this, do this. We sort of organically do it, but then it all links together and it flows and it looks organic. And if you look at how planes fly and how boats move and all of this, right, that this is the actions of millions of people over thousands of years create these structures, much like bees. And it's interesting that, like, if you stand back, you look at bees, you look at their whole hive, you look at the whole colony, and it all makes sense. You know, you're like, okay, the worker bees do this, the queen does this, the drones do this, this happens because of this. So much so that biologists would even say something like, the worker bee does this because it then does this, and then another bee does this because. But those bees don't know any kind of because.
No, it's just instinct. It's just natural.
They just go for it. Now, what if, or not even what if, but it's like, why would we assume that we're any different?
Any different, yeah.
You know, we should assume that just like those bees, that all of these things that we think we're doing because we want to do them, right? Because the bee that goes out and gets the nectar and collects pollen on its thing and then comes back, it's just acting on like animal instinct and desire. Its because is in the moment.
Right.
But it contributes to this whole greater thing, and that desire evolved over millions of years as an interplay of it with the hive. Why do we assume that our desires are any different? And that's a huge part of the book. It's a huge part of this concept that I'm trying to get at, that it's why liberty is important. It's why free markets are important, is because when you put restrictions, it would be like putting restrictions on a bee of what color flowers it could go to.
All right.
Now, is the hive, if the bee's like, oh God, I want to go to those blue flowers over there. I want to go to those blue flowers. But there's some sort of restriction that the hive puts on, like, we cannot go to blue flowers for whatever reason, because some queen bee 5 generations ago didn't like the color blue, so it was like, no blue flowers. Like, how is the hive helped by that? Are they helped or are they hindered? And I think that that's the true reason why it's so important that we recognize this is what liberty's for. It's because we don't know. We don't know why we are thinking in a certain way, or why we have a desire to do this thing, or start this business, or investigate this idea, or talk about this concept. We don't know why.
Yeah.
We don't know why, but it's If you free up the market, if you free up people to pursue exactly what their desires are, like the bee, if you have the trust that there's a greater organizational system, whether you call that God, whether you call that Gaia, whatever it is, and you let it play out over time, that's how we advance. Otherwise, if you try to put all these regulations on it, you're playing God, really.
Yeah. Yep.
So
very interesting.
It is super interesting, dude. It is super interesting. And, you know, when it comes to the free market, I think this will bring us into our story. Jocko Willink, do you know who he is?
No.
I guess he's a former Navy SEAL. I want to say that he's a former Navy SEAL. He's on, he goes on the Joe Rogan podcast all the time. He's like hardcore, super hardcore, like get off your ass, get shit done type of guy, you know, that like Navy SEAL motivation. Right. Super smart guy, right? Super smart guy. I think most Navy SEALs are generally on like a genius level. You have to be pretty smart to be even go through all of that. He put this up in relation to North Korea. This is this Jocko tweet. I thought this was great. So Blake Johnson asked him, at Jocko Willink, how do you feel we need to approach this North Korea issue? And he said, drop 25 million iPhones on them and put satellites over them with free Wi-Fi. And I think that that's exactly what we're talking about here, Christian. It's exactly what we're talking about. The free market will fix it. If you allow people to choose the things that they think will benefit them the most, if you allow them to choose them, you'll get to peace.
Right.
You'll get to peace. Because people in general are peaceful with each other 99.9999999% of the time. And even 99.99% of confrontations that even get a little heated, where even violence is a possibility, end up getting defused. Because people are averse to violence, man.
Yeah.
Except the psychopaths. Except the psychopaths. And so let's talk about what the psychopaths are up to. That's news story number one. And this guy, I've called him a narcissistic sociopath, but I think that he may at this point have evolved to full psychopath. Well, he's got the violent means at his disposal now. And we've got the disaster. We've got the people banded together, all as one. Let's come together. Let's eliminate these partisan rancor. Let's all pull together as one. That's bad. I mean, that's literally what fascism is. What a fasci is a fasci is an axe. It's a bundle of sticks all together around an axe. That's the symbol of the fasci. Everything bundled together as one. And that's what we're seeing. Trump. Let's show this debt ceiling story. So here we go. Here we go. And look at that picture. Through the, that looks like the Oval Office. Through the Oval Office window in the White House, Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump smiling and hugging. I can't believe that they actually let someone get a telephoto. If you could get a telephoto lens, can't you get a scope? That's amazing to me that they would let somebody do that. That's not a good look. You know what I'm saying? That's not a good look. So let's talk about this. This is from the Washington Post. Trump, Schumer agree to pursue plan to repeal the debt ceiling. President Trump and Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer of New York have agreed to pursue a deal that would permanently remove the requirement that Congress repeatedly raise the debt ceiling, three people familiar with the decision said. Trump and Schumer discussed the idea Wednesday during an Oval Office meeting. The two, along with House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, agreed to work together over the next several months to try to finalize a plan which would need to be approved by Congress. One of the people familiar described it as a, quote, gentleman's agreement. The three people spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss details of the meeting. Senate Democrats hope they will be able to finalize an arrangement with Trump by December. On Thursday, Trump was asked by a reporter at the White House about abolishing the congressional process for raising the debt ceiling. He replied that there are lots of good reasons to do that. So, Christian, what this basically comes down to is that every time that the borrowing, the sovereign borrowing, the debt, every time they hit the ceiling, of the amount that they can borrow, right? Their credit card limit of the government, they have to go in and vote to raise it. And within that voting, that's when you have the threats of the government shutdown. It's usually something that the minority party can use to gain a lot of leverage over the majority party to not get. It's how they wrangle. Now, first off, you're at the debt ceiling. You shouldn't be spending above that. And I think most people who are libertarians are like, the mid-anarchist libertarians are like, it's the debt ceiling, so the government should shut down till y'all figure it out. Now they're talking about, let's make it so, I don't even really understand what that means. They no longer have to vote to raise the debt ceiling? Does that mean there's no debt ceiling?
Whoa.
Like they could just borrow unlimited? I don't know what that does to the credit rating of the country, but that's a bad look. Like now you're in Ponzi scheme territory because the central bank will just keep printing money. They'll just keep lending it. So I don't even know what that means, but one thing that I'm pretty sure that it means is that's war funding. Because when you've got the bipartisanship, the only thing that both parties are always in agreement on is war. Always. The leaders of both parties are always in agreement on war because they're heavily lobbied by the aerospace industry, the weapons industry. They got to do it. And it's easy. The public, if they scare the public enough, the public goes for it. And so, there's the bipartisanship. The mainstream media has been going after Trump since the beginning. Oh, not anymore. When he wants to spend, not anymore. So here's this Trump party. This is from the New York Times. Mainstream media praises Trump's maverick bipartisanship. Bound to no party, Trump upends 150 years of two-party rule. That's a big headline. When Donald J. Trump set his sights on the presidency in the 2000 election, he pursued the nomination of the Reform Party, a home for disenchanted independents. Quote, the Republican Party has just moved too far to the extreme right, he explained. The Democrats are too far to the left. In the end, he dropped the campaign and the Reform Party, the leftover construct from Ross Perot's two independent presidential candidacies during the 90s. It was one of at least 5 times that Mr. Trump would switch party affiliations over the years. Quote, I'm the Lone Ranger, he once said in another context. Now in the White House, President Trump demonstrated this past week that he still imagines himself a solitary cowboy as he abandoned Republican congressional leaders to forge a short-term fiscal deal with Democrats. Although elected as a Republican last year, Mr. Trump has shown in the nearly 8 months in office that he is, in many ways, the first independent to hold the presidency since the advent of the current two-party system around the time of the Civil War. In recent weeks, he has quarreled more with fellow Republicans than with the opposition, blasting congressional leaders on Twitter, ousting former party officials in his White House, embracing primary challenges to incumbent lawmakers who defied him, and blaming Republican figures for not advancing his policy agenda. On Friday, he addressed discontent about his approach with a Twitter post that started, quote, Republicans, sorry, as if he were not one of them, and said party leaders had a, quote, death wish. Until now, the American two-party system has resisted assaults from the outside for more than a century and a half. No new party has captured the presidency since Abraham Lincoln's Republicans in 1860. Even formidable figures like Theodore Roosevelt failed to break up the duopoly. Unhappy with his Republican successor, William Howard Taft, Roosevelt formed his own progressive party, also known as the Bull Moose Party, to mount a comeback in 1912, winning 27% of the popular vote and 88 electoral votes, but losing to Democrat Woodrow Wilson. And they go on in this to compare Trump to Reagan and Clinton for working across the aisle, now that he wants to bomb the Middle East and grow the government at home. So the media that has been at war with Trump loves Trump when he wants to go to war. This to me is these are all indications that war is coming. That war is coming. Because the mainstream media, they want war. War is so good for their ratings. Dude, when the hurricane was going on, everywhere I turned
was the hurricane.
Was hurricane news. And when war's happening, particularly at the beginning of the war, dude, their ratings off the charts. Did you see any of the coverage where they would, like, for no good reason, they were one-upping each other by, like, how dangerous of a situation can we put our reporters in?
Right.
Did you see any of those? Where I was like, what are you, like, why are you standing? There's no reason for you to be out there reporting from the dead middle of the storm. There's like waves crashing behind this guy. He's like getting blown away like this. The cameraman's like strapped onto a thing. And I'm like, go inside.
Yeah.
Go inside. But no, they had to one up themselves because it's entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's exciting. Oh, there's shit blowing around. Oh my God, look at that. It's a disaster. It's like it's a train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
You can't look away. So the media they'd love to go and send their reporters and embed them in a real war, and things are blowing up, and they get to show planes zooming by, and tanks rolling, and and boom, things blowing up, and the reporter's like, oh my God, I'm so scared, and Geraldo Rivera's got a revolver, and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anderson Cooper gets to wear his little khaki, war things and go in the middle. So they're egging him on. Mm-hmm. They're rewarding the guy. After beating him up about all these different things, they're rewarding him. And that, you know what? The whole immigration thing, they're going to let it go away. The whole DACA thing, they're not going to cover it. They would have covered it before. They would have covered the protests. They're not going to do it. They're going to let him have it. Now they're like, he's an independent. He's a free man. He's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. Mm-hmm. He's this unique character who's just, no. No, war.
Fuck.
That's what it's all about.
That sucks.
Yes, and it's war on behalf of the banks, which is our second story.
Yeah, this is interesting.
So let's do it. Number 2. We're about to see a very interesting shift with currency. It's funny because a friend of mine who I had met in Acapulco actually was going through New Hampshire on the day that I was speaking and stopped off at the Stone Church and got there after my speech. But we did end up having lunch together. He brought his kid, and it was funny because he had said that he was thinking about bringing his youngest child, and then when they went up hiking, he was like, well, maybe we could just leave him with Vin. And then and his middle son, or his older boy, said, oh no, we're going to come back and all he's going to be talking about is Bitcoin. So I guess that's the line that I'm getting, but this is the reason why it's important. I'm not talking about it from a standpoint of speculation, and I keep saying this over and over and over again. Currency is so important, and the current financial system cannot stand up to the new technology and where things are. We saw a prime example of that this week with this Equifax hack. Not only was Equifax, a credit reporting agency, hacked, and 143 million people's personal information was lost to hackers, but then the hackers demanded a ransom. I didn't know about this. This was actually forwarded to me over by the editors at Activist Post, and they did a great story about it. This is being underreported, but I find it very interesting. I don't know if it's real or not. I don't know if this is a false flag. I don't know if this is a setup against Bitcoin, but it definitely says that this currency represents something completely new. And I think we're going to see more of it. Why don't you throw up this AP Equifax story? This from Activist Post. Credit agency Equifax threatened to pay up in Bitcoin or else. Credit reporting agency Equifax was hacked, potentially endangering 143 million Americans' social security numbers, birth dates, and other private information. Unless, according to the alleged hackers who hacked them, Equifax pays the 600 BTC ransom, which comes out to about $2.6 million, by September 15th, according to a dark web site. The supposed hackers note that they won't publicly post credit card numbers of the credit agency, suggesting they may pawn them on dark web carding forums. Quote, "We are two people trying to solve our lives and those of our families," the group explains. "We did not expect to get as much information as we did, nor do we want to affect any citizen, but we need to monetize the information as soon as possible." The hackers appear to have a sense of humor, and how they arrived at that amount is even funnier. Here's how they claim to have arrived at the number. Quote, 3 Equifax executives sold $3 million in shares, taking advantage of their insider information after the attack, notes the site. "We believe that 600 BTC is a fair amount." So throw up these reasons. So this is what these guys are saying. Here are our reasons. This is why the hackers say they did it. We are two people trying to solve our lives and those of our families. We did not expect to get as much information as we did, nor do we want to affect any citizen. But we need to monetize the information as soon as possible. Every day that passes is worth less, and the limit will be on September 15th. That day, all the information except the credit cards will be published. It's a necessary damage for companies like Equifax to learn. If up to day 15 they pay the requested amount, all the information and all the backups will be deleted. Our word may seem insufficient, but we do not gain anything by posting personal information if it is not absolutely necessary. So clearly they're going after Equifax. Now, this thing about the sale, about the insider trading, throw up this stocks thing. Really interesting. This is Mellon Anders responding to this, and the story is 3 Equifax executives sold stock before the company revealed the cyber hack. This is a story on the terminal. He gives the link. And the quote says, the trio, quote, had no knowledge that an intrusion had occurred at the time of the share sales, Equifax says in a mailed statement. So, Christian, these executives, 3 executives, sold $1.8 million worth of shares. So basically what happens is they know there's an attack at the company that they're executives with. Equifax, the biggest credit reporting agency. They know there's an attack. They know data's been stolen. Potentially, this means that the stock could drop. So before it's announced, they go and they sell a bunch of shares at the high price.
Crazy.
So this is a situation where, yes, there are a lot of moral issues at stake here, right? So the first thing is a credit reporting agency is very likely something that would stick around in a stateless society, a reputation engine. Like, that's how you would get most everything done. Now, the question is, are the things that are included in an Equifax report, how many of those are sort of fabricated by the banks? So, for instance, was listening to a thing recently, something like 80% of the profits of the major banks are fees and penalties.
Holy shit.
Overdraft charges, monthly account fees, a check bounces, a fee for that, a wire fee, like all of these different fees and penalties that they put on privately accounts for 80% of the profits of commercial banks. So then you figure somebody doesn't pay that, or they have checks that bounce, this and that. That goes to Equifax, that gets reported. That's how Equifax is ostensibly making their money. Okay, there's a little bit of a moral issue there, but more than that, it is the reporting agency is actually a peaceful way of getting this whole thing done.
Yeah.
Right? That it's like, you don't follow through on your deals, you don't go to jail. It just becomes less likely that someone's going to loan to you in the future or whatever it is. It becomes harder for you to move through the world. No problem with that. So these guys hack this company. They end up with way more information than they thought they were going to get. They didn't hack it to release it, they say. They don't want to hurt citizens. Why? How does that help them, right? They want to monetize it. They want to monetize it by but they do it by holding Equifax ransom. Now, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
But on the other side, you've got these Equifax executives selling on the open market with insider trading, which really that should actually see them prosecuted for financial crimes. Like, that's a financial crime. That's legitimately, like, if you are an executive at a publicly traded company, you can go to jail for insider. Look, Martha Stewart went to jail for fucking insider trading. Right? Because Martha Stewart Living is a publicly traded company. She was an executive, so she was registered with the SEC. So if she did those things, fines and potentially jail time, and she got jail time. These guys should get jail time. Now, should they pay the ransom? I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a crazy situation.
If they don't pay the ransom and this all gets released, the difficult part about this is Equifax is not, you don't voluntarily sign up to be a part of Equifax.
Yep.
You understand what I'm saying? You don't voluntarily sign up. You're just moving through the market, and then something occurs, either good or bad. It doesn't. It's either. Right? So if you pay back your loan on time, or if you don't pay back your loan at all, both things go to Equifax and the other credit reporting agencies. So there's a ton of people on that. That's 143 million people, dude.
Yeah, and there's other factors too, like with student loans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Dude. You
dude.
go to college, and then you can't get a job, and then they're sticking these credit reports. And
Yep. So we'll see. I mean, I clearly this is not the best and most optimum way of handling it.
Right.
I would love to see. They're going to have to figure this out as we move through with cryptocurrency.
Well, you would think
right?
too, if somebody was very good at paying their bills and paying their stuff on time, that they would voluntarily want to be with something like Equifax too.
Well, they are one way or the other, right? Like you are, and that's the crazy part, is that the people who really stand to be damaged by this are actually the people with good credit,
Yeah.
right? The people with bad credit, their information's worthless to anybody,
Right.
right? You can't do shit with it. It's the people with
So
good credit.
the good people are being penalized.
That's what makes this situation so wild.
And you would think on the other side too, if you were somebody that didn't. So if this was in other words, if this was a voluntary business, if somebody signed up with something like Equifax and then another company checked that and they saw that they signed up, they would automatically assume that they were.
I don't know, man. Like it's a weird one, right?
Yeah,
there are definitely better solutions, and it's the reason why something like ecosystems like Swarm City start to present these opportunities, because it's like, look, you're choosing to participate in this particular ecosystem. There's reputation. They have a reputation engine inside Swarm City.
Built in.
It's built in. There's reputation attached to any particular address that you're using, any particular wallet, right? So these solutions are starting to come up, and you can choose to use that wallet or not. But it's like you can't get through using the banks in this country, which you have to, without the credit reporting agencies getting involved. You know, that's just how it is.
Another component to the crypto savagery.
But it's maybe not going to be happening in China. Let's talk about these Chinese ICOs, because I think it brings us right into it. PBOC. This is the official notice from the People's Bank of China regarding ICOs and virtual tokens. So this is what China thinks about things like Swarm City. This is a translation of the official. Recently, a large number of fundraising activities through issuing tokens, including initial coin offering, ICO, have taken place in China, giving rise to speculation and inviting suspicion of illegal financial activities. These activities have disrupted the economic and financial order. To implement the spirit of the National Financial Work Conference, protect the legitimate rights and interests of investors, and manage financial risks, and in accordance with the law of the People's Republic of China on the People's Bank of China, law of the People's Republic of China on commercial banks, law of the People's Republic of China on securities, law of the People's Republic of China on cybersecurity, regulation of the People's Republic of China on telecommunications, measures for banning illegal financial institutions and illegal financial businesses and activities, and other laws and regulations. The relevant matters are hereby announced as follows. 1. The essential attributes of fundraising through coin offerings. So this is them, the People's Bank of China, defining what an ICO is. Financing through coin offerings refer to financing bodies raising virtual currencies such as Bitcoin or Ethereum from investors through illegal sales and circulation of cryptocurrency or tokens. Such offerings, in essence, are unauthorized and illegal public fundraising and are suspected of involving in criminal activities such as illegal selling of tokens, illegal issuance of securities, illegal fundraising, financial fraud, and pyramid schemes. The competent authorities will closely monitor the related developments, strengthen coordination with the judicial departments and local governments, strictly enforce the law and work based on the current mechanism, and resolutely clamp down on market irregularities. Any suspected crimes, once identified, will be transferred to judicial department. The token or, quote, virtual currency used in coin offerings are not issued by the monetary authority. Such currency does not have the characteristics of money, such as legal tender status and mandatory use, has no legal status equivalent to money, and cannot be circulated or used as currency in the market. Let's just pause on that one for a second. That's really interesting. So, Christian, you can come to us. I met, there are some friends that I've made now in New Hampshire who are starting a fermentory business, like making apple cider, basically. Various different ciders. Their ciders are amazing. But one of the things that they had gone into, and they're going through all the appropriate legal channels to do it, although they're the first fermentory in the state of New Hampshire, so the state doesn't really know much about it. They went in and they said, here are the things that are on our menu. They had to give it to the Department of Health and Human Services. And one of the things was kombucha. And the person at the department said, well, it's illegal to manufacture and sell kombucha in the state of New Hampshire. And they were like, well, I don't understand. Where in the law does it say anything about kombucha? And she said, well, that's the point. Kombucha is not mentioned in the law, and so we have no means of regulating it. So they said, so what you're saying is it's unregulated? She said, no, it's illegal. Because we don't have a law about it, it's illegal. Which is like, actually, no, that sounds like communist China. And that's exactly what they're saying here, where they say it doesn't have the characteristics of money, like legal tender status and mandatory use. It has no legal status equivalent to money, and therefore cannot be circulated or used as currency in the market. So they're saying, unless we tell you what money is, it can't be circulated in the market. This is really important that people realize that that's communism. That's socialism. When you see that in our country, that's going against what this country is based off of. If it's unregulated and you own it, you can trade it. You can circulate it in the market. It's not up to the government to draw a line around everything. Anything they haven't drawn the line around, you're free to do, which is the exact reason why I'm against things like the legalization and taxation of marijuana.
Yeah.
Right? This is the idea of a socialist. This is the idea of a collectivist. Like, no, let's put it on the books. Let's draw a line around it. Let's say what can be taken from the people at the point of a gun. Okay, so let's go back to this, PBOC-ICO. This is number 2. No organizations or individuals shall engage in illegal fundraising through coin offering. From the date of release of this notice, fundraising through coin offering shall be banned immediately. Any individuals or organizations that have completed fundraising through coin offering shall make arrangements. This is crazy. Any individuals or organizations that have completed fundraising through coin offering shall make arrangements to return the funds raised and to ensure that the legitimate rights and interests of the investors are protected and the risks involved are properly managed. The government departments concerned will strictly investigate and address the coin offering activities that have continued despite the ban and the illegal activities in the projects that had completed fundraising. So if anybody made money on an ICO and somebody who bought it is in China, they've got to return it. Number 3, management of related platforms shall be strengthened. From the date of release of this notice, any so-called platform that provides trading and exchange services for coin offering shall not engage in exchange businesses between legal tender and token or virtual currency, or engage in proprietary trading activities or trading as a central counterparty of tokens or virtual currencies, or provide pricing services. That's amazing. Or act as information intermediary for tokens or virtual currencies. As for the trading platforms with activities that have violated laws or regulations, the financial regulatory authorities will notify the administrative department in charge of telecommunications to adopt measures such as shutting down its website platform and mobile app, notify the administrative departments in charge of cyberspace to remove its mobile app from the App Store, and notify the business administration department to revoke its business license. 4. Financial institutions and non-back payment institutions shall not conduct business related to coin offering, fundraising, and trading. Now, this part's interesting. Financial institutions and non-bank payment institutions shall not directly or indirectly provide product or services such as account opening, registration, trading, clearing and settlement for fundraising through coin offering, virtual currencies, or insure businesses related to tokens or virtual currencies, or include tokens in insurance coverage. Once clues of illegal coin offering, fundraising, and trading is identified, financial institutions and non-bank payment institutions shall promptly report to the departments concerned. So they've basically made it illegal. Here's 5. The public needs to stay aware of the risks of coin offering, fundraising, and trading. There's so many of these. 6. There's up to 6. Self-regulatory organizations shall exercise industry self-regulation. Christian, basically what they're saying here, the thing that blew me away on this one is if you're a website and you offer even the exchange rate of yen or RMB to Bitcoin, for instance, or RMB to Ethereum, or RMB to Swarm City tokens, they will shut your website down in China.
Wow.
They've basically made everything illegal when it comes to crypto. And that's what, 1 point something billion people? Done.
Do you think that's coming to the States? Hopefully not. But
Well, the question is why, right? You got to say
Right.
why. The first thing is capital controls. They are super worried, and they have been. Well, why has all of the construction that was planned for Vegas on the Strip, why is it basically all shut down? It's shut down because it was all Chinese money. At the time when they first made the deals, the party members in China who have money, who have stolen it from the people, were taking it out and were bringing it into America. They were investing in those casinos and whatnot. That's where all the money was coming from. Then China instituted capital controls. They're like, if you try to take this money out, we're going to put you in jail. So they couldn't get the money out anymore. So then this Bitcoin thing came along. So who do you think was investing in Bitcoin? The same people. Who do you think was doing these ICOs? The same people. It was a way for them to move their money. Put it all in Bitcoin, then sell the Bitcoin for fiat somewhere else. Okay, you've just moved your money. You didn't move it through the bank. You didn't do any of that. So this is what China's trying to do. They're trying to keep the money in the country. And I think a lot of people are shocked by this, especially since China is trying to make its own digital currency. China is mining Bitcoin. But that's the party. The party, people misunderstand like Chinese people from the party. That's the Communist Party doing all of this. They're going to participate. They're going to participate as a market actor. Of course they are. But here you've got all these people, and the most horrible part about it is it's all this untapped human capital. Now these people can't participate. I don't know what's going to happen, man. I mean, it's a hard thing to keep under wraps. And it may very well be something that it's worth watching. I think it could potentially topple the Chinese government.
Yeah.
Because it's something that can happen it's going to create a black market in cryptocurrency. The Chinese people are not going to just stop doing it.
Right.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Probably going to be doing it even more.
Well, and they're going to be doing it with the most, what they're doing in this case is they're creating an incentive for the most anonymous, privacy-related, third-party things across borders. Like, I think the Chinese government is really setting themselves up in this case. Like, this may actually really strengthen, in the end, it may strengthen the censorship resistance of cryptocurrency overall, because all the people who are thinking about how do we move it into China have to be super careful. It's very interesting.
Which will increase the value because, well,
I mean, it'll increase the value of privacy coins, certainly.
Yeah.
It'll take those up, the Zcashes of the world and whatnot, but also it gives a chance for other blockchains, like Ethereum's open in public. But if you had like a much more private Ethereum where you could do smart contracts and all of this, I don't know, man. There's a lot of work being done over there. And I don't think that the Chinese government is fully ready to do this. I don't think they can enforce it. That's the other thing. But we're going to see.
yeah, how would they enforce that? Just
I guess, I mean, they're a wealthy country. They've got the resources, but we'll see, man. I think they're going to come out with their own cryptocurrency. It's a story to watch. I actually got into a little bit of a row on Twitter with some of the people from Particle because they had put out a tweet where they said, we're not an ICO, so this recent news doesn't affect us. But clearly by these rules, they are an ICO. You know, and then after going back and forth, they were like, well, but we're not a Chinese entity, so it doesn't affect us. It's like, well, saying you're not a Chinese entity is completely different than saying you're not an ICO. Right? Because if you're up in China, if people in China can participate in your project, well then, to the minds of the Chinese government, you're an ICO. Now, whether or not they can come and arrest you because you don't live in China remains to be seen. But whether or not they can shut down your operation, any pieces of your operation that pop up in China, or whether they can demand, like, what happens then? What happens when Chinese people who were investors now with these ICOs say, we want our refund then, Chinese government? And the Chinese government, the US government went to Greece and arrested the Russian citizen founder of BTCE. Like, can the Chinese government, on behalf of Chinese citizens, start demanding the extradition?
Yeah, this gets really, really muddy. It's crazy.
And we know that the US government is already more than happy to put in jail crypto people.
Yep.
So I thought that it was very irresponsible for these people to just be saying, for the people at Particle to say, oh, we're not an ICO, so don't worry about it. No, man. That's super unethical. Super disrespectful to the, like, you need to tell the whole story. You need to have whoever your head of development or your CEO, however you're organized, you need to have a video with them explaining, okay, here's the situation, here's the law, here's how we understand it. We may be an ICO. We're trying to figure this out, not just like dismiss it like, it doesn't affect us, don't worry about it, to try to keep their token price up. And that's what I had an issue with, is that it's very important in this environment. And this is the problem with the speculators, right? This is the problem with the Bitcoin bros.
Yep.
They're not in it for ethical reasons. They're not in it for moral reasons. All the people that we've talked to about this, I mean, starting back to the Stash Crypto guys, right? Both of them dedicated to privacy, dedicated to the cypherpunk, the libertarian side of it, understanding what this was about from a standpoint of getting the central banks out of being involved with money. Eric Voorhees, same situation. Roger Ver, same situation. That's the people who will behave in an ethical manner, because that's what this is about. It's about recognizing that the system that we have currently is immoral. And that countries trying to control what can and cannot be money, what can and cannot be currency, that's a problem. That affects liberty, and it gives a great amount of power to both the state and the people in charge of the banks. Which, great story about it that relates completely to this. The story out of Venezuela, this had slipped past me, man. This AFP story. And I thought that it was super interesting. Venezuela to sell oil in currencies other than the dollar. So we know about the petrodollar. And we also know, and we'll talk about, deciding to sell oil in currencies other than the dollar has not boded well for the countries and the people who have decided it. But this is off of Yahoo News. It's from the AFP wire. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro announced Friday his government will sell oil and other commodities in currencies other than the dollar in a bid to weather U.S.-imposed sanctions on the embattled country. Quote, I have decided to start selling oil, gas, gold, and all other products that Venezuela sells with new currencies, including the Chinese yuan, the Japanese yen, the Russian ruble, the Indian rupee, among others, he said during a television broadcast. An economy free from the U.S. imperialist system is possible. Washington's tough new sanctions on Caracas bar U.S. banks from trading in new bonds issued by the government or the state-run oil company PDVSA. The goal is to restrict Venezuela's access to vital bond and equity markets. The aim is to, quote, deny the Maduro dictatorship a critical source of financing to maintain its illegitimate rule, the White House said. Maduro railed that they amounted to a financial and economic blockade as ratings agency Fitch downgraded Venezuela and warned default was now likelier. The country has to make $3.8 billion in debt payments in October and November, while its foreign currency reserves have sunk under $10 billion. So this is like economic hitman style right here, right? So it's like, you owe us a bunch of money. You got to pay it in dollars. Okay, well, we'll sell some stuff. You're not allowed to sell it for dollars. You're not allowed to trade in dollars at all. So these guys decide, okay, he says, we're going to sell it in a basket of currencies, other currencies. Well, that has not boded well. That didn't bode well for Saddam. That didn't bode well for Gaddafi. That didn't bode well for Iran. Every time people bring this up, every time people say they're going to move outside of the petrodollar, it's good, the hammer comes down on them. So this is potentially opening up. There hasn't been, I mean, that would be a major war. Like a hot war with Venezuela, that would be major. That's not some like tiny Caribbean country, right? Like they're hardcore.
Yeah.
And they've got enough people who are about the movement over there that they could put like militia on the street. I saw some video of them like training average people. They've actually they're starting to train up militias there, expecting the U.S. to invade. So we've got Syria, northern Syria, Turkey area. I don't think we're going to have too many troops there. North Korea is a flashpoint. Venezuela, like, are we really going to do this? But again, here we go. People deciding it's getting into the zeitgeist. Okay, you won't let us into the banks, or you're going to behave the way that you are. We'll just move away. We'll create our own thing. And I guess that's a good time, moving away and creating your own thing. I mean, that's what our guest is all about. Free State Project, as I just got back from New Hampshire. Let's, what do we got? 56? Why don't you bring Matt on? Let's go to break, and then we can come back with counter markets, and then we'll go on with Matt Phillips. Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/VinArmani. On Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And also we are streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. So before we get into our interview, I want to talk to you a little bit about counter markets. Counter markets at countermarkets.com, trends and strategies for maximum freedom. You can go and get your new issue because we have September. We have the September issue out. For those of you who have received it already, you know that we decided this was going to be our list issue. This one is really jam-packed full of information. The listicles, I guess those are list articles. So mine this time were the 5 most disruptive blockchain projects. And they are not all cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of things happening on the blockchain, and I believe that these 5 concepts represent a whole new economy, potentially even a whole new internet. We've talked about a lot of them here. You can invest in every single one of them, and a lot of them are at a very, very good price right now. So for those people who either are speculators or who are looking to build their businesses on top of blockchain platforms that already exist, each one of these I chose because they have an ecosystem factor, a factor that you can build your business on top of these right now. I was asked recently in a podcast, actually with Mance Raider, which is Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast, and he's getting a lot of following now. He's like a meme. He is a meme G. I will tell you, go and follow him, follow Mance Raider, because you will be laughing all day. Great libertarian memes, great anarchist memes. But he had asked me in the interview what I would say to people who think that they're late to the game, late to the crypto game. You are not late to the game. It is so early. You're only late to the game if what you think is that you're going to invest $100 and 5 years later you're going to be a millionaire off doing nothing. But you're not late to the game if you're ready to dive into this thing and to build some value and to create some wealth and to, more importantly, to build a better world and to do good for other people using this technology as a means to gain freedom. If you're ready to do that, you're not late to the game at all. The game has just started. In fact, maybe it hasn't even fully started. We're just seeing the people lining up at the starting blocks now. So, countermarkets.com, trends and strategies for maximum freedom. Go and get your first issue for free. We know that you will love it, and we're so sure of that we're even going to knock off 30% if you go and you buy with cryptocurrency. Participate in a little crypto savagery, get rewarded, and you'll get an entire year's worth of a subscription to our newsletter. I think you're going to really enjoy it. With that, we will get to our guest, and maybe we'll even talk about a little bit of crypto with him, because New Hampshire is quite the place for it right now. My guest is Matt Phillips. Matt Phillips majored in politics at Princeton and interned at the Cato Institute along with Free State Project founder Jason Sorens before joining internet advertising pioneer DoubleClick in New York City. He then co-founded Right Media, purchased by Yahoo in 2007. He now lives in New Hampshire, where he is an activist and investor. He grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, so he doesn't want to hear anyone using the New Hampshire winter as an excuse for not moving. Matt's president of the FSP since March 1st, 2016. Matt Phillips, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here.
So we got a chance to hang out in Portsmouth. I talked at the beginning of the show about how much fun I had. I'm like a little weary because I really did enjoy myself fully, but thank you for the hospitality. It was really, really a great event, and I'll definitely be back, and then I guess I will be there in the winter in February. So talk to us a little bit about what the focus of this particular event was and what it means in terms of the raft of events that you have when it comes to the Free State Project.
So that's a great question. So the Free State Project has a couple of official events that it does every year. The first one is Liberty Forum, which you're going to be back for in February. And then we, of course, have Pork Fest, the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I don't know if you can see the shirt here from last year. And we've got so many activists here that we've started to have events that the Free State Project itself isn't doing, that people in different areas of New Hampshire are putting on and producing themselves. And the Free Coast Fest is one of those. And the Free Coast is a reference to the New Hampshire Seacoast. Yes, New Hampshire has a seacoast. It's about 18 miles long. And lots of cool stuff out there. Portsmouth is really, one of these sort of quaint New England towns, but it's got a lot of culture, a lot of cool restaurants, booming business, with summer tourism. And then UNH is a few minutes away, so we've got a lot of college kids there too. And the Free State Project activists who live out there, on or near the seacoast, they do this every year about this time in September, and it's a cool little boat cruise that we got to go on out to the Isles of Shoals and see the different bridges and stuff. Talk about entrepreneurship and different kinds of activism and general libertarian issues that are interesting to us. So it's sort of the third Free State Project-ish event that we do every year, and it's a great opportunity to come and check out New Hampshire and see what what's going on here, and what are the who are the activists and what are they working on, and how you can help. And I overheard you just the last segment before this, just talking a little bit about being early or late to the crypto game, and I sort of just struck me as sort of the same thing is going on here as far as the political migration, the political movement that we've got going on here. We get a lot of people who are like, well, I couldn't possibly move to New Hampshire. You guys don't have, constitutional carry. Well, actually, we do now as of this year. You don't have, marijuana well, actually, we just got that this year too. A lot of people have some reason why they think that they're too early to come here and they're waiting for other people to do it. But that's not really the way it works. The way it works is you got to jump in and make it happen. And so if you're, I just want to say to the people out there that are kind of waiting for us to do all the heavy lifting, don't. Get here, find something to do, make it happen, turn that $100 into, $1 million in 5 years. And it's not too late either. You certainly didn't miss the boat on it. There's a lot of people that have already moved here. We've got over 2,000 people who've moved already within the last 15 years. So got a lot of really good stuff going on here that I'm sure we're going to get into.
So I think a great way to start, and I think it's always a great way to start, especially, and I think that occurred to me as well. I first met you in Acapulco, and that was when I had heard of the Free State Project, but at that event on that weekend was when New Hampshire started to really resonate with me and get into my mind. You and I sat down, we had lunch, you told me your story. I'm always interested in, because you have a very interesting story, so I'd like to talk about that, but if you could walk us through why you decided New Hampshire of all places. You were there certainly earlier than somebody who comes now, and you've had a great influence in being there. Why did you decide New Hampshire? And then why did you decide that you were going to dedicate your life as the president of this movement, which you've done quite well? How did you make that decision? If you could walk us through your process in that.
That's a great question. So as you mentioned, I worked at DoubleClick for about 4 years and then left and co-founded another company called Right Media, which also did online it's called ad tech, advertising technology. And then that company got bought by Yahoo in '07. So I had a nice little windfall. And what's interesting is I actually, I was living in New York City at the time, and I wanted to try and get out of New York City. And I was looking at sort of various places to, where I should settle sort of next. And I actually considered and then decided against New Hampshire, partly because we had at the time, and still unfortunately have, although we're working on it, there's no broad-based income tax here, but there is a tax on interests and dividends, which if you're the kind of person that is, has quite a bit of wealth and you're living off of that, you make a lot of your income from capital gains, which we don't tax, and interest and dividends, which we do here in New Hampshire. And it's not that much, even it's 5%, and there's an exemption up to $2,400 for individuals. But I crossed it off because of a tax policy that this state had. I decided that I didn't want to move there. And I know, from my own personal experience and from talking to others, that affects a lot of people. People actually do make decisions on where they want to live based on the policies in those jurisdictions. That's Sure. just a fact. It's just the way it works. States sort of assume that, people don't think about that or consider that, and that's not true. They do, especially businesses. Mm-hmm. So I ended up in Washington State, which has no income tax of any kind. Actually, in Vancouver, Washington, which is right above the border, right above the southern border of Washington, right across the river from Portland, Oregon. Oregon, notably, has no sales tax. So people who live in Vancouver, Washington, don't pay income tax, and then they go across the river to shop. They don't pay sales tax. So it's a little jurisdictional arbitrage, which is nice. Interesting. Anyway, so I traveled around the world for a few years and took interesting classes, and I learned how to shoot, which I didn't grow up with guns, so I was taking a bunch of classes at Front Sight outside of Vegas, and started to kind of think about what I really wanted to do next and what was going to challenge me intellectually, and that I could use my skills and experience to do, but that would make the world a better place in a way that online advertising wasn't really. And I also was started reading around that time. I started reading some new books, and I was a politics major, and I interned at Cato in '97, and so I was pretty well. I could argue the anarchist position, but I don't know that I fully bought into it or believed it, or I really felt like it's like academically interesting, but I didn't see how we would ever get there. And I kind of forgot about it for 10 or 15 years while I went off and did my business career. And I started reading some books. I read Murray Rothbard's For a New Liberty. I read The Machinery of Freedom by David Friedman, and suddenly just like all that 2 decades of having sort of had it be gestating in the back of my mind, it all just clicked, and I was like, okay, yes, I get it. That's me. Yes, there's a transition question about how do we get there from here, but that's just details, right? So awesome. Then I was like, okay, I want to go to some different political conferences and conventions and see kind of what's going on out there, where I can sort of dip a toe in the water and get involved in the movement, which I hadn't really been. Like, I didn't work on the Ron Paul campaigns of '08 or '12. I went on a Reason cruise. I actually went to Hans Hermann Hoppe's thing in Turkey, and then ended up at Liberty Forum in 2013 in February. Now, I had signed as a Free Stater in 2003.
Can you explain to people what that? Can you explain to people what that means? Signing as a
Sure.
Free
So
Stater?
the Free State Project is an effort to recruit people, libertarians, to move to New Hampshire, and as part of that, we we had this sort of assurance contract, right? It was like, you don't have to move until 19,999 other people have moved, or have at least pledged to move within 5 years of hitting that number. So for the longest time, we were just trying to get people to commit to moving. So we had a statement of intent that you would sign to say, yes, I intend to move to New Hampshire and exert the maximum practical effort towards the creation of a society in which the maximum role of government is the protection of individuals' rights to life, liberty, and property. And that you had 5 years to move from the time that we actually got 20,000 signers. So I actually signed that pledge in 2003. They picked New Hampshire, we all voted, the 5,000 people who had signed at that point voted and picked New Hampshire. And I was just starting my new company at that point. So I was like, okay, awesome, New Hampshire. I can't deal with that right now. I can't think about that. So, and then I went off and largely forgot about it. And then 10 years later, showed up at Liberty Forum, not really knowing what to expect, and found myself in a room with 500 other hardcore libertarians who were actually making it happen. They were getting elected as representatives at the state and local level. They were starting businesses of their own. They were meeting up with each other regularly to talk about activism and policy and how to advance the cause of liberty. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is actually happening. This is going. This is on. There's momentum. There's excitement. There's buzz. And so I came back for a Pork Fest later that year, and then I went to Freedom Fest. I actually met a guy at Freedom Fest who lived here, who I hadn't met at either of the previous two events. And he was similar to me, entrepreneur, business, was starting to get involved in politics because he felt like he couldn't do the business things he wanted given the political policies that were in place. And then by September, I had moved here. So it was really, for me, it was a choice. Like, I could have gone and sat on a beach somewhere and drank tequila all day until I get old. I could have done that. But I just feel like I would have, at the end of my life, I would have regretted that. I would have looked back and thought, regretted not doing more to make a contribution, and to try and help advance this cause that I believed really strongly in, even though I felt at the time like I had very little hope had no idea how I would be able, or anybody would really be able to make any progress on it, given, the trends and the patterns that we see in our world today. Showing up here in New Hampshire changed all that. It was like, wow, okay, so here's a place, people are moving, the particulars and the specifics of this area, both in terms of its geography, its demographics, the political system we have here, where we've got this state government that is very, very representative and close to the people, and it's really easy to get elected. Changed all that. It gave me a hope. It gave me a vision of how we could actually make some progress. Maybe not all the way, in my lifetime, but certainly, that we would be able to start in a really meaningful way. Making some of these things happen, changing some of these policies, getting rid of taxes, getting rid of regulation, reducing spending on, wasteful programs, at least to the degree that we would be able to show other people in other states around the country or in other places around the world, hey, there's this place that's doing this. It's actually executing on some of these libertarian principles and ideas, and it's working for them. They've got, more people are moving there, and they've got, rising, business activity and business revenues and rising wages and rising quality of life and less crime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really the idea of the Free State Project. It's not just to free New Hampshire. It's to really show everybody all around the world what you can do if you actually implement them in a serious and explicit way.
So
So that's my story.
So I saw something today, and I think maybe this would be a good jumping off point. I saw something today. They're doing this voter fraud investigation, and they said
Yeah.
that there was some 5,000 out-of-state people who registered to vote in New Hampshire, and they're saying that when they ran the numbers, that could have swayed the election for both that. Supposedly, right? But they said that what struck out to me was that the number that they said would have swayed it was 2,700 people. That really stuck out to me, and I wonder if you could talk about before we talk about the overall vision, because I know that that's something that we can talk about a lot because it's very broad and it seems like people bring a lot of different things. Certainly, as an anarchist, I have a preference for starting with a minimal government and then to no government. But can we talk about how the government is organized there and why even a small amount of people moving of all the places in the country, it actually can make a difference? I mean, if the Trump administration is saying like 2,700 people made a difference, that seems like something we can actually work with.
Sure. So New Hampshire is about 1.3 million people total, which, if I don't know how much your viewers know about the cities that they're living in,
Right.
But if you're in LA or New York, or
Vegas has more than 1.3 million people.
exactly, it's really not a lot of people, and it's a small area, so it's pretty easy. 90% of the population in New Hampshire lives in about 50 miles of Manchester, which is the largest city at 110,000 in the middle of New Hampshire. So it's real easy to get around to all these different places. But the state government, the state legislature has a Senate and a House, and the Senate's 24 members, but the House is 400 members. It's the third largest parliament or legislative body in the English-speaking world. And so the average state rep only has about 3,000 constituents, and it's pretty easy to get elected as a state rep. So that's sort of part one. Next, the whole 20,000 number came from sort of back of the envelope calculation that the guy who came up with the idea, Jason Sorens, did to say, how many people would it take in a state of, around 1 million people, not to take over and, implement by force or whatever, how many people would it take just to sort of shift the Overton window, right? How many people would it take to shift the conversation so that when discussions about policies come up, for example, about marijuana or about firearms or about education, that enough other people, if you have 20,000 activists who are constantly talking to their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, people they run into on the street, whatever, so that all the rest of the 1.3 million people have actually heard an alternative viewpoint on that, right? So especially for a lot of these policies that, are widely, nobody ever thinks like maybe there's an alternative choice, right? Like public school, a lot of people have never even considered that there's an alternative to that. Well, of course we have to educate the kids, therefore public school. Well, there's lots of alternatives to that, but a lot of people haven't been exposed to that idea. Here in New Hampshire, there's a lot of exposure to alternative ideas about how to do education and everything else, because there's so many of us that are already here, that are already talking, that are pushing these ideas and challenging people to say, well, educating the kids is a great thing and that should absolutely be done, but let's talk about how it's currently done and how maybe it could be done differently, more effectively, less expensively, and more sustainably in the long term. So when policies like that come up, there's enough people around who are like, hey, you know what, I was actually talking to my buddy Steve a couple weeks ago, and that actually doesn't sound like such a crazy idea because he said, this, that, the other thing. So that 20,000 number, and then just to give you sort of another little, what if scenario, in a midterm election cycle, right, like the one that's coming up next year in 2018, the Republican state primary here in New Hampshire will have about 80,000 voters.
Okay.
In the primary to pick who the Republicans are going to nominate to run as, for Congress. And well, it turns out we don't have a Senate candidate next year because we already have our two senators,
Right.
U.S. senators. But in 2022, it will be a U.S. senator. Governor, we have a 5-member executive council sits below the governor that has veto power over state contracts larger than $50,000, and also oversees the governor's appointments of department heads and judges, etc. If you had 20,000 people and they all moved here and they all happen to vote in the Republican primary, which I'm not, advocating necessarily, but I'm just saying if that did happen, that would be 1/4 of the primary vote.
Right.
If you're telling me that that's not enough to shift, to influence the outcome of an election, then I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
That's a pretty good shot. And of course, looking at last year's election, Donald Trump ended up losing New Hampshire to Hillary, but just barely, like on the order of a couple thousand votes.
Right. They said 2732, something like that, 2,732 votes or something.
I think that might have been the final calculation. But then if you look at the, Kelly Ayotte was the Republican senator, and she lost by 700 votes.
Oh, wow.
And the U.S. Senate is, basically tied right now, right? It's like 50-48 and then 2 independents. Well, that could very easily, the outcome of the U.S. Senate could very easily shift what policies get enacted, especially at the federal level. Mostly we don't care too much about what's going on at the federal level, but are focused on the state and local level. But then you look at the local level and you see these towns that are, 5,000 people, 20,000 people, and they've got a 3-member or a 7-member town council or select board. That just doesn't take much to get elected to do that, or to find out who they are and talk to them and change things at the local level. There's a lot of stuff that gets decided at the local level. So that 20,000 number, even I personally don't even think we need 20,000. I think that we're going to start to see some pretty, some pretty significant changes well in advance of that. If we get up to 7,000 or 10,000 people who are activists who are here and they're talking to people, they're running for office, they're starting businesses, etc. I think we're going to start seeing some really significant changes even in advance of that.
I want to get onto this term activist a little bit because it's very different in New Hampshire than I think what most people are thinking, particularly this event that I just went to. Different than PorcFest. PorcFest definitely has some individuals who are amazing and fun, but certainly out there and look like when people think activist, they look it, they walk the walk, they talk the talk, full blast. I don't think that anyone looking at the group that was at Free Coast Festival from the outside would have been able to distinguish it from like a professional conference, an entrepreneurship conference, some other sort of just non-political social organization. But yet I did hear people constantly referring to themselves as activists. Could you talk to us about the sort of veins that activism because it's not one monolith that people would think. What are the veins of activism, and how is that maybe different from how people perceive activism in other realms?
Right, and I've talked a little bit about that, and I think another a lot of people sort of fall into this trap of like, well, 20,000 voters, blah 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 blah. It's like, well, wait. A lot of people move here actually don't vote. A lot of anarchist activists are post-political, right? They feel like voting, legitimizes the violence inherent in the system, and that's okay. You can think that. But there's lots of other different forms of activism, and you can move here and not do any of that. You could just, move to a cabin in the woods and live off grid. I still count you as a colleague and as a comrade, if you'll pardon the tone of that term, but just knowing that somebody's out there, providing moral support and supporting the cause, that's good. But there's lots of forms of activism, especially when you're talking about the kind of thing that we're doing here, right? If you move here and you start a business, you're going to be interacting with some state and local regulators. You're going to be hiring employees. You're going to be doing, marketing, advertising. Where you've chosen to set up your business is going to be a topic of discussion when you're talking to, investors and customers, especially if they're outside of New Hampshire. That's a great form of activism, especially if it's the kind of form of, the kind of business that you were talking about earlier about, involved with cryptocurrencies or, some sort of, new economy thing with a decentralized, organization. Like, we've got several people here that are doing that kind of thing. Um, if you've got kids and you have them in school here, then you're going to be interacting with other parents, who also have their kids in that same school, and you're going to be talking to them about, the education system and how it's broken and how it could possibly be fixed and what are the alternatives. That's activism. That's spreading the message. That's opening people's minds. Um, if you're, going to the shooting range and you're interacting with other firearms enthusiasts and you're telling them, hey, there's this group of people that's coming here and they're really big on that, fighting for rights, for individual rights, Second Amendment stuff, that's activism. If you're moving here and running for office or supporting other people who are, or you're lobbying the, elected officials and representatives on a particular issue or a range of issues, that's activism. We've got people here that stand outside of the courthouse at 7:30 in the morning, handing out, jury nullification literature. And that's a tough beat because it's early in the morning and, you're bleary eyed and the people that are walking in, they're not happy to be there, right? They're going in they're hoping they're not going to get picked because they have a life to lead.
Right.
But, they take the literature, and we've had cases where that actually has happened. And, a jury said, yeah, what the guy did was against the law, but we don't think he should be punished for it because that law is dumb. So that's actually happened. There's so many different forms of activism that range from, the really hardcore running for office or having a really public podcast and being really public and out there, all the way to just living here and living your life and quietly and, interacting with other people and showing that you're not a three-headed monster like many people assume libertarians are, and just being normal and quiet and a good neighbor and a good community member and somebody who shows up when, when there's a hurricane and, neighbors need help. All of that is good activism, and I view that as the kind of activism that I want to see our community, bring to the table here in New Hampshire.
So this is something that, talking about what people imagine libertarians to be, the sort of the three-headed monster. It's interesting. I was on the plane flight back. I was kind of taking the time and just editing my speech that I had given at the event and fixing some of the audio and whatnot. And the guy kind of sitting behind me is like, "What is that?" We got into a talk because he saw the Stone Church logo in the background. He's like, "Oh, what's your church?" And I was like, "Oh, it's not a church. It's not a religious thing." And we got to talking. He was a guy from Maine in his mid-40s, and he was like, we start talking, and he said, "Oh, were you for Gary Johnson?" And I was like, "I don't necessarily vote." And we got talking about the Free State Project and whatnot. And he was like, "Man, I agree with all of those things. I'm a business owner, but I consider myself to be a Republican." And it's like this is something that I've noticed and that I'm interested to get your thoughts on. Traditionally, libertarians have certainly been, people are like, they're Republicans who like to smoke weed, right? That's the traditional beat that people have gotten. But the libertarians that I've met, particularly in New Hampshire, have surprised me, particularly at PorcFest, but anywhere I go in New Hampshire around this group of free staters, where I see people whose interests are heavily aligned with what I would consider the sort of political right in this. They're about gun rights, they're about property rights. Then on the other side, I see people who are what I would traditionally consider aligned with the political left. You know what I mean? These are people who are all about bodily autonomy, organic food, about getting toxins out of the environment, all of these things. But yet there never seems
privacy
to be right.
Is a big issue
Exactly.
coming more from the left, right?
So I'm wondering, with these differing preferences, but yet coming together with the Free State Project, what is the vein that runs through it that is uniting these people, as you've seen it now being president? What do you think are those veins that unite these people who have these disparate preferences, but yet seem to be so dedicated to the same cause of moving this free state forward?
That's a really tough question, and I do deal with that a lot, because there are so many different issues, and so many people haven't really put them into the sort of meta context of what is the sort of philosophical framework that provides for all of this stuff, right? Especially if they're coming at it from a single issue. And you see this on both the left and the right, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you see the people on the right who are all about gun rights and
no taxes,
low taxes, religious freedom, etc. But then if you talk to them about gay marriage or something, they're like, oh, no. It's like, well, how can you be all for this one because you want the government to be out of it, and then you flip on this other issue just because it happens to sort of not align with your value set? And conversely, from the left, right, all those people who are like, about freaking out about privacy, for example, right? They don't want the government spying on them, but it's like, okay, so you want government not powerful in this area because for whatever your reason is, but then you're okay with them being powerful for this other area of life. So why, how can I help you to see that there is a consistency issue here, right? That there's a framework that you already have that you don't know about yet because you haven't thought through it to make it explicit yet, that if you did that, the issue that you really care about would come into clear focus relative to all of these other issues that you just have sort of a default position on because it happens to be that you identify with this one political party because of this one issue, and then you just accept all of the rest of their default positions on all these other policies. Right? You're a Republican because you really care about gun rights, and then just by default you happen to be all about national defense and war and all that. Or you happen to be a Democrat because you really care about marijuana, but then you just also accept all of these other Democrat policies on the other side. How do we help people to do that? I don't know. And in the context of what we're doing here in New Hampshire, there's also a lot of discussion around, for those people who choose to have their activism be engaging with the existing political system, how do you do that? Do you run as a Republican? Do you? We now have the Libertarian Party just got ballot access last year because they had a gubernatorial candidate who broke 4%. So you can now register as or run as a Libertarian on the ballot. We have Free Staters who run as Democrats because they happen to be in a highly Democrat ward, and they tend to be a little bit more of the sort of socially liberal side, and so they generally identify more with that. But they also have their sort of strategy of wanting to be inside the tent when some of these issues come up so they can present an alternative viewpoint. I can't tell you what the right strategy is there. I can tell you the Republican Party of New Hampshire tends to be a lot more libertarian than most other Republican parties, especially at the national level. Is the Libertarian Party, just going to act as a spoiler for all of the good Libertarian Republicans? I don't know, maybe in some cases. Does that mean we shouldn't push it? I don't know. Maybe. The Free State Project itself is a 501c3, so I can't really take official position on candidates or active legislation. But I think it's worth pushing on, generally I think, fight on all fronts. I think that with other political movements, right? Like I want the seasteaders to, be able to make a seastead. I want, Quebec and Catalonia and all those places. I want them to secede too. Like I hope that all of us succeed. And I hope that, at least one of us needs to, because there's got to be a safe haven for people to go who really are dedicated to, finding a place where they can, live their lives with, in peace and harmony and prosperity.
So you said that you can't obviously take a side on existing legislation, but I do know that there are some things that are preferred by the Free State Project that are issues that you would like to see, and that people have decided that these are the things that they're taking on. Can you give us some examples of both? You've given a few examples of things that you've been influential on in the past. Can you give us some idea of what it's looking like coming up in the future in terms of issues?
Well, I can tell you, I can run through really quickly,
Let's do it.
What the, just so far this year, 2017, since the beginning of the year, these are some policies or pieces of legislation that have been passed just so far this year. And I'll do it really quickly, and you can go and look all this stuff up on our website. Okay. Constitutional carry, you can carry a concealed a weapon with no permit. It's actually the best concealed carry. It's the best firearms regime in the country. Decrim, decrim marijuana of less than 3/4 of an ounce. There's a lot of caveats to that, and we're going to continue to work on that issue going forward. We expanded medical marijuana to include moderate chronic pain and PTSD, which makes it that much easier. Cryptocurrency deregulation, we exempted crypto from any state level regulation. We banned warrantless use of cell phone trackers like the Stingray. We have overdose immunity, so if you call in to 911 because your friend overdosed, they don't get charged. Legalized needle exchanges, which is a really great harm reduction method for fighting the drug war. Brew pubs can now make cider. We have greater vaccine options at pharmacies. We now have school choice for towns without public schools, which is a really big one. 1,500 mostly obsolete regulations were eliminated by the governor, and another 1,500 were submitted to the legislature for them to sign off on getting rid of. We have 3 state reps that switched to the Libertarian Party. Those are state reps in the state house. We last year cut the business tax by 3.5% to 4%. There's 2 different ones, and this year we had enough revenue from that reduced tax to trigger another round of cuts at the end of this year. Nice. And then another round of cuts will happen in 2020 pending those revenue targets. So there's a lot of good stuff that's already been happening, and then there's all of the regular background stuff that we've been working on for years now as far as education activism, etc. Areas that we need to keep working on, well, obviously a lot of those are halfway measures, right? It's like one thing to expand medical marijuana to cover more cases. It's another to say, that's an issue for your doctor and the patient to work out. We have marijuana decrim of up to 3/4 of an ounce. Well, okay, that's a start. Obviously, there's more that can be done there. I don't think we can actually do any. I think the Second Amendment stuff, I think we've gone as far as you can without completely getting rid of the law completely, but there again, it's like these little nitty-gritty details that you get into that I have a whole team of people that I refer to depending on what the issue is. But we have constitutional carry. It's actually better than Vermont next door has constitutional carry, but they don't issue a permit. So if you want to go travel to a nearby state, you can't take your permit with you to get reciprocity. You can do that here in New Hampshire, and to get the permit is really easy here in New Hampshire. It's 14-day, maximum. They have to make a decision. $10, no prints. Local town police station handles it. Nice. It's really easy. School choice, I think, is a big one that's going to be, that's sort of one of the big new fights. We've been fighting it for a long time, but and that's one that Free Staters have been pretty significant on as far as their activism. There's a little town called Croydon over in sort of central west New Hampshire, about 700 people. And a Free Stater moved here many, many years ago. Has been on the school board there. And they actually decided, because they didn't have a school that covered a few grades in the middle, they were busing their kids to a nearby town. They decided that instead of doing that and paying something like $13,000 or $14,000 per student, they would allow parents to take that same money and use it to send their kids to a local Montessori school at a cost of about $9,000. And so the town was saving $4,000 per student. And of course, the State Board of Education tried to come down on them. It turned, bucked up went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Didn't actually get there because this year through the legislature, we actually just legalized that as a practice for towns that don't have public schools. Nice. Obviously, there's, that cover those grades. So obviously, there's a lot more room to work on that. I'd love that to apply to, every town for every grade. Again, as a start on a long road towards, privatizing education and having kids and families who, need assistance with getting, education for their children, get that through private voluntary charity rather than through government spending. But it's a start, and it's the tip of the iceberg, and it, even this small incremental little step that we just took proves the model that if you get enough activists in one place, you can actually make progress on chipping away at these issues, and it's just a matter of how far and how fast we get there.
So let's talk about getting enough activists in one place. We've got the next event coming up for you guys, the Liberty Forum in February. For people who are interested, I've spoken here about my experience at PorcFest, talked about my experience at Free Coast Festival. I have not been to Liberty Forum, but just from the guests that are going, it seems like there is a little bit of a difference in vibe. For those people who might want to go, once again, it is wintertime in New Hampshire, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that is all about and wearing some nice sweaters and coats. But what could people expect, people who are thinking, okay, maybe I want to go and check out this New Hampshire thing, and they think, I could do February. What should they expect going in? Can you give us a rundown of what this event's like?
So this event, if you've heard anything about PorcFest, it's held at a campground. It's, there's bonfires and it's outside and it's warm. Liberty Forum is a little bit more sort of typical in that it's a conference that's held at a hotel convention center, the Radisson in Manchester, and it's a little bit more talks and whatnot, but it still has that it's quite a lot of us locals will be there, and so it's a great opportunity to come and meet the other activists who are here and get a sense of what they're working on and what the vibe's like. It's right at the bottom of Elm Street in Manchester, which is sort of the cultural center of Manchester. A lot of great restaurants and bars, and there's a couple of museums and stuff like that. So it's a great chance to sort of walk around and see that. Right over in West Manchester is a private club that's been around for many, many years where libertarians like to go and socialize and mingle, known as the Quill. And Manchester is also very much in the middle of the state, so if you want to stick around for a couple of days before, a couple of days after, and drive around and get a sense of it, you can certainly do that. The last couple of years, the weather's been pretty decent. We haven't had any major snowstorms or anything, but something that's different about up here with major snowstorms that you might not experience if you're used to dealing with snow down in DC or someplace like that. We're used to snow. The airport is never shut down because of snow. The snow plows, when there's a storm coming, the snow plows, they park in the parking lot at Dunkin' Donuts and they rev their engines, and I've never seen more than 3 inches of snow accumulate on any of the major streets or highways around here. So it's normally pretty easy to get in and out. I would say fly out of Manchester if you can, not Boston. Boston sometimes shuts down because of that. But last year I think we had pretty decent weather last year. We'll see this year. It's a good opportunity to sort of see, February. It's like, what's the worst the weather can really be here in New Hampshire? And as I think you mentioned in reading my bio, I grew up in Phoenix, so I just wear long underwear all winter and turn the heat up. You get into your car, your car is in your garage that's insulated. You get into your car, you turn your seat heaters on, you drive to wherever you're going. It's 10 seconds to walk inside to wherever it is you want to visit. It's not that bad. And then on top of that, we've got skiing and hunting and snowshoeing and, hiking and all of these amazing, snowmobiling, all these amazing winter activities and sports, outdoor activities that you can partake in here during the winter. And then during the summer, you get, hiking and surfing and swimming and, water skiing and all that. So, the seasons, some people just, they don't want to deal with the cold, and I can't blame them for that necessarily. They're just not hardcore enough of a libertarian to really want freedom. So, if that's your thing, that's fine. Stay in Southern California and pay those taxes. But if you really want to, make any kind of progress on it, like, is a hard winter really, is that really what's going to deter you from wanting to be part of the solution for freedom in our lifetime? Like, okay.
Well, I'm going to check it out myself. I'm certainly being sold on New Hampshire, and I think I've turned into quite the booster, so you're going to be seeing a lot more of me.
I'm
Matt,
so happy about that.
Matt Phillips, did you have anything you wanted to leave off with? You've definitely spoken so much about New Hampshire, but anything that maybe we didn't cover that you think would be an important message?
Well, I think I think you and I could probably talk, and I'm sure that we will once you get here, all about a wide range of things, including your book, which I just read on the plane on the way home a couple of days ago, which I thought was really, really great.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing that getting out there. But the only thing I would say is just Free State Project is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. We're entirely dependent on private donations from individuals like you. So if you would like to contribute to that, you can go to our website, freestateproject.org/donate. Come check out our events. Liberty Forum we just talked about. That's at nhlibertyforum.com. PorcFest is porcfest.com. Free Coast Fest just happened, but next year it'll probably be happening around the same time. If you can't make it here to any one of those major events, we have meetups all around the state every day, every week, every month. If you're coming up here, email help@fsp.org, and we will connect you to some activists who are meeting up so that you can come and get a sense of what's going on up here. Just encourage you to come and visit. It's really hard to grok what's happening up here without actually getting up here to visit. So you really owe it to yourself to come and check us out.
100%. And if I will mention, you guys do take cryptocurrency donations, so that's a very, very good thing.
We do take Bitcoin, we take Ethereum. If you have some other cryptocurrency that you don't want to shapeshift for whatever reason, just email us and we'll help sort it out. Happy to take it.
I love it. I love it. Matt Phillips, we will be talking with you again soon. So Matt Phillips, president of the Free State Project, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ben. Good to see you.
So, Christian, New Hampshire.
Yeah, it looks cool. I want to go check it out.
He's really telling the truth that you can't really get it without going. And the reason why, well, one, it's super picturesque is one thing. Like, you fall in love with that anyway, right? So many tourists go there just to look at it anyway. But two, it's the people, right? And you can't verbally express sort of what you feel coming off the people. And it's like, if you weren't a libertarian, before you meet these people, you definitely will be. Like, I've never felt so welcome, amongst a group of strangers.
That's cool.
And it's people who want liberty. And I think that the most interesting part about it is that there is this really broad, what you would think of like the preference spectrum. It really puts into, it really is principle versus preference. Like, you start to realize, like, oh shit, all these things that I thought actually divided people politically, once the principle is you're allowed to live whatever preference you want, and while I may not agree with it, I will still allow you to do it, and I will fight for your right in the political sphere for you to be able to do that. You start to see that it's like, oh, we really don't have any disagreements. Like, you live your life, I live my life, we do it that way. So, very, very interesting. And again, for people who want the book, who want my book, I thank Matt for that. I thank him for saying that. vinarmani.com/self-ownership. I'm actually really pushing the audiobook. I really, really like what John Lowe did with the audiobook. And there's something about, I think there's certain things that it's better hearing it. I think the human mind is better in terms of auditory a lot of times.
I'm definitely an auditory learner.
Me too. And I think, look, oral traditions go back a lot further than writing. And there are oral traditions that are thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. People do learn that way. I mean, that's the initial way that our brains learned from way back in the day. It's how we learn as little kids, So, very good. What do we got in terms of time? Maybe we just end it a little early and I can go take a nap.
Yeah, catch up on that.
Yeah? Okay. Well, before we do though.
Oh yeah, we got some cool stuff coming.
Vin Armani Show shirts, along with a whole bunch of others.
Yeah, there's a cool Rothbard shirt up there. There's on Govern Yourself. So
governyourself.com. Links in the show description. Let's see. This one.
Same thing, just different cut.
Next week I'm going to have a little Chiron for it. I should have put it this time. This is women's tank. Vin Armani Show. There's a whole bunch of other ones. The site's up.
Yep.
It's BitPay right now.
It's
right?
BitPay,
so you could pay with Bitcoin.
I removed all the other options for pay, so it's
only crypto.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So we've got that. The vodka, I'm getting to work on that in the next couple weeks. That will be up and running. So I'm ready to have that. Dude, it's coming along.
Yeah.
A lot of work to be done.
A lot. And I was thinking, I'll talk to you a little bit after the show. I was thinking
Sure.
I had an idea as well for some of the things. So.
Uh-oh. Well, so for those of you who really want to practice crypto savagery, this is the chance. This is the chance to do it. So great. Well, let me say goodbye to the people.
Awesome.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you very much. And I want to also thank my guest, Matt Phillips. And for those people who have not checked out New Hampshire, I really cannot recommend it enough. I've gone now in the summertime, and it's been fantastic. We'll see in the wintertime. Maybe I come back and I say, don't go. But I think it's going to be all good. And actually, both myself and Jack Spirko, along with a whole bunch of other people, will be at Liberty Forum. So as he said, lots of speakers. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you can hang out with your favorite libertarians there. And, of course, my favorite part of being there is just interacting with people, and I'm there to converse and answer any questions that anybody has or just talk about whatever. I love it. It's a great chance for that, and I love meeting with people. So thank you guys for joining us. If you want to check out the archives of this show, you can do that at vinarmani.com, where we have everything organized and searchable. Please go check that out. We've got it, both the full episodes and the individual bites. We'll have this interview as a standalone as well as these stories by the end of this week. If you want to listen on podcasts, you can do that on iTunes and Stitcher. And so we will be back again next Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And until then, stay free.